Welcome back to the news. This is going to blow your mind. Space Marine 2 was made for less than half the cost of Doom Eternal. And that's not just some crazy speculation, it is straight from IGN's interview with Saber Interactive CEO Tim Willits, who actually knows exactly how much both of those games cost because, yeah, he's working at Saber right now, but he was id Software studio director until 2019. And what makes this truly wild is that Space Marine 2 is outselling every game id Software made before 2019. What we're basically watching is a third-party developer, one that managed to break free from the Embracer Group's lovely gravitational pull, given all of that chaos. They've went and they've absolutely crushed it with a sequel that nobody thought we would ever see, at least when we finished playing Space Marine 1. It's the perfect example of something that's becoming increasingly clear in 2024. Massive budgets don't guarantee success. Sometimes that's going to be because a team is a bit smaller, a bit leaner, maybe more focused, and they end up making the games that the players actually want. And when you hear that Space Marine 2 cost half of Eternal, you'd absolutely think it's that. But the truth is, it isn't. It's actually something entirely different, and it's how the industry is changing. So yeah, there's absolutely more to this one, including today's sponsor, who I absolutely love because they protect me and I don't even need to think about it. So here's the deal. Data brokers exist. They harvest our data any way that they can. Be that a corporate, data leak, anything like that, it ends up in the data brokers and they sell it. And that could mean you'll get robocalls, spam, or even worse, security vulnerabilities, especially social engineering. I recently found out about people sites in America. That is terrifying. And the good news here, right, is that we have got rights designed to protect us. But of course, as with all, it's really hard for us to action in those. And that's why incogni.com/Bellular News is your and my superpower in this. And it is so simple. As I said, we call that legal right. But do you want to spend your limited time writing takedown notices or whatever to loads of different data brokers? No. How do you even know you're on data brokers? Well, Incogni scans the internet, scans the brokers. They automatically send those takedown requests. So you don't need to. And they add you to suppression lists. And best of all, they keep on re-scanning. So here's my dashboard. You can see 114 sent, 8 in progress, 106 completed, and I'm on 21 suppression lists. And that's just brokers that won't recollect my info and my info being taken down. Now, you can also enter 3 email and home addresses as well. And the upshot is really simple. Your data is not spreading all about the place without your knowledge or consent. I have not got a single robocall since I started with them and added my phone numbers. That actually matters. So Incogni means you can benefit from the laws that are meant to protect you, but designed in such a way that you can never realistically use them. And you'll get 60% off the annual plan at incogni.com/Bellular News. Let's begin with what some of Saber's people have said. So, Tim explained his view in this year's failures, be that, say, Suicide Squad or Concord, and to him, there's a clear problem that Space Marine 2 didn't have, and that is a lack of focus. He says that where others do too much, they were, quote, just be the ultimate Space Marine, melee, ranged, swarms, that's it. Others are guilty of what he calls overscoping, which is basically just, you have tried to do too much shit. The quote from him is this: they look at some other game that just came out and say, oh, we've got to do this, add this, we've got to do this, and then they lose their focus on the core, and that's what actually makes the game fun. So yes, if the game is fun, people will play it. Rather shocking that this is even in the conversation, but it actually does need to be. So many games are bloated, perhaps having loads of RPG mechanics and loads of balancing and tweaking and numbers that they maybe don't even need. I mean, even as a kid, years and years ago, I remember when Assassin's Creed started to lose me because even by the 3rd entry or maybe the 4th, suddenly we had a tower defense minigame being involved and all sorts of silly stuff. Now, we've all felt it, right? Games that are bloated with a lot of thinking and a lot of systems, but where the fundamentals are actually subpar. And of course, especially lately, as all of that bloat has happened, games have got stupid expensive to make, we've all got used to $70. Now, Space Marine 2 was a $70 game, even though it cost half of, the $60 game known as Doom Eternal. That's where things get kind of interesting, though. Money. Unit economics, and that's where we've got to talk about spiraling development costs. In his interview, Tim spoke about that, and remember, he was at id, so he very much knows what he's talking about. He said, there are many games, sadly, especially out of North American developers, where if you do not sell 5 million copies, you are a failure. I mean, what business are we in if you fail, if you sell less than 5 million? Yeah, you can't outrun the basic unit economics of your business. Space Marine 2 charged more than Doom Eternal, it cost half, its unit economics are better. Let's dive into that and figure out how the hell did they make that thing so cheap? All right, so to kick off our financial journey, we're going to do the money in. Doom Eternal sold 3 million units in its first month. Space Marine 2 hit 4.5 million. I mean, a weekend Space Marine 2 revenue estimates were $202 million. That's a shitload of dollars. Now, we do not have the exact like-for-like numbers for Doom Eternal, but we do know that it pulled in 450 million in revenue over its first 9 months and was the fastest in its franchise, which basically just means both of the games did well. Space Marine 2 does appear to be doing better, and if the continued success of Saber's last game, World War Z, with its great long-tail support, is anything to go by, yeah, Space Marine 2 is going to be making a lot of money long into the future. Okay, so that's our money into very successful games, but now we've got to talk about the development costs, and this is where things are interesting and counterintuitive, almost certainly not what people would have first thought. Now, we know that both of these are games built on existing foundations. Doom Eternal was built from the bones, of course, of Doom 2016, and Space Marine 2 was built from the bones of World War Z. That may seem very bizarre, but if you're out of the loop, World War Z was Saber's previous game, and basically, it was great. It was seriously great. It did super well in the market, and, well, it had extensive long-term support. They even had a first-person mode to come into it, which is kind of crazy, and it's where they developed all of the Horde tech that has led to Space Marine 2's Tyranids being like the most impressive thing ever, basically. So both are teams with established pipelines, tools, and systems. And even with Saber Interactive paying Games Workshop for the license, which we actually know from interviews is surprisingly reasonable in terms of cost, well, there's still a massive cost disparity between these two games. So it's probably not the tools tech experience. Let's look a bit closer. Let's take a look at the credits. And when we do that, we see that Space Marine 2 has way more people working on it. Yeah, so in total, 2,061 roles worked on Space Marine 2 and 1,302 worked on Doom Eternal. Now, okay, that's not the core staff. Space Marine 2's core staff was 500 people, but still, way more hands touched Space Marine 2. So with numbers like that, so many more people, how did Doom Eternal cost twice as much to make? Is time maybe a factor? Was one of these games in development for way longer? Well, napkin mathing based on public data, which is obviously not an exact science, well, it puts Doom Eternal at roughly 33 months from start to finish, and Space Marine 2 at roughly 44 months. So that means that Space Marine 2 was made by a larger team for a longer amount of time, but cost half as much. How much money do id pay? How little money do Saber pay? Or is it something just a little bit different? Spoilers, obviously it is. That's why we've got a video. So there's the absolute explosion of AAA game budgets, and a lot of that is happening in North America, and that is, in his interview, what Tim points to. Now, he does mention, obviously, the scope and the budget overruns, but there is another angle to all of this. Now, you've got to remember, Tim joined id in 1995. That means that he saw the rise of North American development firsthand, and he was later in the executive level. That means he was getting insight into budgets, into hiring, and it's not like he was doing this just stuck in Texas in a bubble. These guys will have been to GDC every year. There will obviously have been QuakeCon. So there's a lot of talking. Whenever somebody who's experienced like this talks, well, they basically tend to know what they're on about. When we think about technology, right, tech companies, we think of Silicon Valley, California, but Texas actually has a real big tech scene, and that hurt id Software. Basically, it drove wages up. And the reason why that happens is successful companies and talent end up clustering around each other, right? There's a bit of a feedback loop that, in a way, can drive up efficiencies because all of the people who know what to do in an industry just happen to live roughly in the same place, which can be great. But obviously, a lot of those companies do well. They do well globally. They bring in a lot of money and they start to compete. So the pay just goes up and up and up. Competition between companies drives those prices up. And in many fields, well, a tech company, they could probably use your programmer. And that means that if you're a games company who is competing in that environment, you are going to struggle to keep up. Now, obviously, in the last few years, the job market has not really been what it was within games, but I mean, at least speaking personally, I have heard almost unbelievable anecdotes from the last few years. One example is a company losing a senior animation staff prospect to an offer that was north of $300,000, which is a lot of money and absolutely was wages spiraling up. And that is the sort of thing that has skyrocketed costs of games development in the major games hubs, especially in North America. And so if you're id and you want to do development from Texas, where you've always been, yeah, tough luck. Deal with it. let's talk about Saber Interactive. So Saber are HQ'd in Florida, but they're not doing the bulk of their work in Florida. The bulk of development in Space Marine 2 took place in their St. Petersburg and Yerevan offices in Russia and Armenia, which, let's just say, is a tad cheaper than Austin in Texas. And it's not just those offices. Saber owns subsidiaries like a Russian QA company called Bytex, a Hungarian animation studio called Digic Pictures. All of those will cost less, and that's why Saber brought in almost 30 outsourced studios, touching everything: audio, cinematics, quality assurance, so many things. And then, of course, there's their basic teams, like the main core development squad, being in those two countries as well, not North America. Now, obviously, there could be a dark side to this, of people having horrible working conditions and being worked to the bone and all of that. If there's a story there, do let us know. But if we're to assume, right, just good faith, decent enough pay for the cities that people are working in, then the point here is the basic maths are so much more competitive than North American development. Now, outsourcing gets so much flack from parts of the media, from audiences, and in some cases rightly so, because it can be done awfully, as all things can. But in this example, it is a AAA quality game that is outselling other AAA games that doesn't need to sell millions upon millions upon millions just to break even. And why this matters? It matters because the industry's watching, and well, maybe you've not been paying attention, but turns out it's already started changing team structures. Okay, in the old days, if you were management paying a developer a salary, there was an easy way to get more work out of them. Just crunch them. Keep the salary, jack up the hours, get more work done. And that is actually what id did with Doom Eternal. And that's not just some people leaking because they're pissed. That is the executive producer Marty Stratton even saying that they basically crunched 2019 to make that game happen. Now, that's all in service of the AAA polish and production values that audiences expect. And those are the same things that audiences expect that Space Marine 2 was able to match for half of the budget by using global arbitrage. That's basically the point. Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk, those are not made by, say, Orange County-based companies, are they? But obviously there are many people in those companies who are looking on. As an example, Activision have a new AAA venture. It's called Elsewhere Entertainment, and it certainly is elsewhere. It's not in California, it's in Warsaw, Poland, right? American leadership, Polish wages. That is how the company is trying to, well, not pay absolutely humongous Californian salaries. And this is not necessarily some story of seedy exploitation either. I mean, you can pay somebody well in Poland and still save a whole load of money than, well, if you were paying somebody like an LA wage, as an example. This pattern is absolutely everywhere. Take Riot and Blizzard. They both outsource loads of asset creation, and speaking of an alumni of both, Greg Street, who in the Warcraft days was known as Ghostcrawler. He's got a new MMO project, and they are planning to have just 100 to 150 core staff in their team, and everything else they want to outsource. Basically, it's a numbers game. Follow the talent pools and the favorable exchange rates. We now live in a time where people all over the world actually want to make video games, so you do not need to be located in California or Austin, Texas, or something like that. So companies are chasing talent concentrations and economic advantages based on their needs. And that could be in the other direction. One of those is CD Projekt Red, actually opening a studio in Boston because they want some highly valuable Unreal expertise, which makes a lot of sense given what they want, or Larian setting shop in Dublin because, well, Dublin, Ireland, tax breaks. Very, very good if you're bringing in a lot of money from across the world. Or perhaps one that you'll know, every major publisher in Canada, because, well, amazing tax incentives exist there. Or for a spicier example, Skull and Bones being made in Singapore, and I've got to imagine Singapore are not particularly happy with how that whole shindig went. The point though is, this is a wake-up call for the rest of the industry. Saber managed to compete with Doom Eternal sales figures while spending significantly less and charging $10 more. That is the lesson that executives will learn. As for you and me, well, look, there are pros, there are cons. If you're in California, in the game sector, this could be quite challenging. I've got a feeling that big teams will not be located there as much. That being said, as those economic efficiencies improve, well, other types of games are possible. I am not privy to the specific right numbers of, say, Witcher 3 or Cyberpunk 2077. Obviously, Cyberpunk was a shit show on launch, but do you think that Cyberpunk 2077 or Witcher 3 could have been made if, like, Irvine wages, like where Blizzard are, where Riot are, Santa Monica wages. Do you think they would have been able to make a game of that size, that much content, if they had to pay that much per staff member? So, a flip side of this, for you and me, could be that there are games of a certain scope, like actually at the top end of scope, that could become viable now. Or it could be the case that higher quality, like almost bigger budget feeling games that actually cost less to develop, that basically games could be more viable maybe within the 1.5 or 2 million sales target, which could open up some of that delicious AA market that so many of us have been missing for quite a few years now. It really is so fun for me talking about how the sausage is made, but you can also talk about how the sausage is being broken, and to learn how, I'm going with this, a sausage is being broken. Look at what Nintendo want to do with Palworld. Amazing, amazing segue. Go watch the video, it's really good.